back, and many thanks for staying with us. We are going to be talking about the skyrocketing cases of female genital mutilation with Honorable Peace Mutuzo, the Minister of State for Gender and Culture. She's also joined by Kabahenda Flavia Rabuhoro. She is an MP from Chegegwa District and also the chairperson of the Committee on Gender. Let's diverge into this conversation. All right, Honorable Peace Mutuzo, what is the status quo as far as female genital mutilation is concerned in our country? Give us a situation analysis of where we are.
Good morning, viewers. The status of FGM is on the rise.
Since there is social distancing, I believe you can remove the mask.
In the last 10 years,
Indeed, Honorable.
We've been performing so well. Actually, in the whole of Africa, out of about 27 practicing countries practicing FGM. Although we have only 5 districts where FGM is practiced. Including Amdat, Moroto, Kapchorwa, Kwen, Bukwo. Those are 5.
Which one is grappling the most?
Amdat.
What about the base sub-region?
It has reduced because of the government interventions. We had a REACH program, which would do, it was a non-government organization, but it was working very closely with the local governments. It was able to identify the surgeons, put them into groups where government would give them money from UEP fund, and they were able to shift from practicing FGM for cash and got capital. We are trained to do something else. We did male engagement. Men were champions of fighting against FGM. We worked with the cultural institutions, and we had reduced to 0.3%, and we were the best in all the 27 practicing countries in Africa. We were the best. But 2 years down, there was a reoccurrence that hit us with a lot of shock. One myth is that there is a tree which flowered all of a sudden. And in their culture, when that tree flowers, means that the spirits are not happy.
I see.
So they thought there is something wrong they had done. So they went back to FGM. There is also a graduation or a succession program that we had not envisaged when we were struggling against FGM. Those who had outgrown it, at around age 45, when their children are now able to get married, circumcision for men is okay, is acceptable, even health-wise. So, but there are functions the women would not get involved into if they are not circumcised. So their husbands would have to borrow another woman to step in to perform the duty the mother of this young man, the mother who is not circumcised, would have performed. So the women were insecure. So they offer themselves because they cannot afford to see their husbands borrow somebody. Excluded from a function where his son is involved. So some women were lured into that. But in the last 2 years, also some other challenges occurred. Of course, with the lockdown. With the closure of markets. You know, Karamoja, the business is about cows. So if they don't go to sell the cows, what else are they going to sell?
So they are girls.
And their girls should be initiated from childhood to adulthood. And the path is that circumcision, which indicates, so a child, as soon as she's circumcised, that means she's ready for marriage. So they would try to bring them early into qualification of adulthood. So FGM triggered again. So we were there recently with the Committee of Parliament where they were doing the oversight role, as the Honorable Kabahenda will elaborate. We were also following up on the efforts we have been putting in place, how we can reactivate and revamp this. And of course it went underground when we instituted a law against FGM. Now the perpetrators and those who were practicing stopped appearing vividly where government can catch them. They would do cross-border. They would go to Kenya and even medicalize it. They would even go to health centers in Kenya and other countries, do it and come back after some time when they have healed, so that government cannot be able to notice that there was anything wrong, because we are really very vigilant about it. Now we are putting efforts in place to have a cross-border task force, and I will be in Buko on Friday to institute it, because on that whole border section from Amdat to Buko, we are having very robust cross-border discussion to ensure that we enforce the law, and we sensitize. Would wish to have a radio station in Amdat, because Amdat is one area in Karamoja which does not have a local radio station, but cannot also listen to the Karamojong version in Moroto. They don't understand each other. So they need to have their own radio. We are talking with the government institutions, Ministry of Finance, to do budgeting. And since my sister, Honorable Kawahenda, and the committee are involved into the budgeting, the new parliament needs to be put into picture. So that's why we're there together. And of course, we are now transiting to program budgeting, from sector budgeting now to program budgeting. That means we have to bring many sectors together, and to ensure that we integrate issues of gender-based violence, because gender-based violence is now on the increase, and actually that is a new pandemic.
And FGM is a human rights violation and also related to gender-based violence.
Oh, sure, it is one of the first gender-based, actually the most dehumanizing gender-based violence. But you know, in Karamoja, all forms of gender-based violence are occurring. Beating up wives and husbands, inheriting of widows still occurs, child labor, early marriages, forced marriages, child trafficking, denial of rights to own property for women.
Especially and land.
Not only land, even a cow, even a goat, even chicken. That is what it is. So we need to touch base with Karamoja, but we know the history of Karamoja.
Indeed.
There are previous governments that were not encouraging development there. Actually, they had even a slogan, don't wait for the Karamojong to develop. But they didn't know Karamoja holds 10% of the total land of Uganda. So if you can't develop 10%, then you don't even know what you're governing.
Honorable Peace Mutuzo, Minister of State for Gender and Culture. Thank you very much for that humble submission. Let me also bring in the chairperson of the Gender Committee, Flavia Kabahendo. Let's talk about some of the societal push factors that are leading to gender-based violence, that are leading to female genital mutilation, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. Like she did say, we had made headway for the last 10 years since the institution of the law. But then she says, since COVID-19 attacked us or hit us, there's been skyrocketing cases of FGM, GBV. What are the societal push factors? We'd like to know.
You see, for us as a committee on gender, much as we have a lot of departments to oversee,
yes, Flavia,
we chose to oversee gender-based violence after the Uganda crime report of 2020 that was released this year, that indicated that gender-based violence was the highest crime we had in the country, and more so, the eastern and the northeastern were the triggers of this escalation. And so we thought we should go on ground and find out what the drivers were of gender-based violence. And in those regions, of course, FGM became so prominent as one of the drivers, and many others, of course, poverty and this idle kind of situation at the lockdown when the schools are not in operation. And so ours as a committee was to establish the truth of this from the report, which we did. Secondly, we wanted to know whether everyone was playing their role. What was the role of the community? What was the role of the culture institutions? What was the role of the local leaders? The role of the security, and everybody's role, so that we tackle this together. And of course, like the minister has told you, a lot of things are happening in those regions, especially the Karamoja region. There is also rape marriage. When the child, because we encountered a situation where a girl of 8 years had been cut in FGM, and of course that determined that she was now a woman. And then the mother sends her to go and pick sorghum from a neighborhood. And then when she reaches there, some boy of 19 enters her room, wants to rape her, she fights, and then the parents of the boy come and hold the girl for them.
Wait, no way.
This one holds the hand, this one holds the leg, so that the boy can rape, and immediately he rapes her. Then the following day they go to the girl's side to negotiate cows.
No.
So there is rape marriage, there is widow inheritance. We really encountered a number of things, and we were looking at who is supposed to be held accountable for this. Government has a role to provide justice. And of course, the courts there are very far. Secondly, even the local leaders, some of them wouldn't want to talk about those issues because most of them have a cultural aspect in them. And so they don't want to touch where culture will not allow, and they seemed to be, their will was not there. And then we were amazed because the technical people in health told us that it was now becoming a health issue, because now that the FGM is being done in the bush, in the caves, they are doing it so badly that they end up miming these girls. And they cited some woman who has since become paralyzed. And she can no longer do anything for herself from the time they carried out FGM on her. And so they were recording very many cases of under 18 girls who came to deliver babies, and they had fresh cuts.
Wow.
And so they were worried as a health sector that this was turning into a health hazard.
Their right to health was being violated.
Their right to health was being violated. Their right to reproductive feelings and sexual relationships were being hampered. And of course, we talked to the RDC. If these people are going to the caves, if these people are going to the forests and spend their 3 months doing this act, wouldn't this turn into a security issue?
Indeed.
Because if they were rebels under the caves, wouldn't they have swung in action? But why would security agencies sit and simply tell stories that these guys are going to the forests, that they are going to the caves, that's where they are carrying out? And so for us, we are saying there must be justice.
There must be legal justice for these victims.
Aid must be provided.
All right, thank you very much, Kabahendo Flavia Rabuhoro. She is the MP Chegegwa District and also the chairperson of the Gender Committee. We also do have the Honorable Minister, Peace Mutuzo. She is the Minister of State for Gender and Culture. We do have a law on FGM. It warrants for a 10-year incarceration for any culprit who is arrested in this regard. Now, the fact that there is a resurgence and continued practice of FGM, does that mean that this is not a deterrent enough to actually hamper the activities that we are seeing within the north and eastern parts of this country? Is the 10-year sentence a deterrent, or we need to come up with more punitive measures to punish these culprits?
Actually, what we need to do, first of all, we are into a session of reviewing the law.
I see.
Even that law on FGM has some gaps that need to cover. The kind of evidence they need.
What kind of gaps?
The kind of evidence they need in court is not one that can be adduced by a person who is offended.
Presentation of genital parts in courts of law.
You can't present genital parts.
Thank you.
I wish she was even in charge. This girl is 8, 9, 10, 15 years. She's taken by elders who are her relatives. And these relatives are supposed to continue sustaining her and supporting her, and therefore taking your father to court. You look at a compromise. After court, after he has been reprimanded, what happens? Your father and mother are all involved. Your sisters and relatives are all involved. That is one. And then, of course, the evidence we talked about is also different. And then we need an affirmative action for Karamoja.
I hear you.
In education, because girls are died. You know, when we locked down and said all children go back home, the Karamojong were the most worried people because home is the most unsafe place
for a girl.
For the girl. So an affirmative action where we can keep these girls and continue sensitizing the relatives, the parents, to adopt a new culture. The health centers are overwhelmed. So even if we're talking about regional hospitals, we need to have a regional designated facility in Karamoja to address this matter. Why do I say this? Health center tools, many of the health center tools, which are the closest to the community, are handling a number of 200 to 300 mothers in a month. But you see, the designated officials who work on health center too is a nurse. That is the highest, and not necessarily a midwife. A nurse.
They don't have an inpatient.
They would have maybe a medical, I don't know whether they even have a medical officer that comes in once in a while. The distances are so long. For a young pregnant mother who was pregnant at, say, 13, 14, the first puberty, the first time she gets into menstruation, she's already pregnant. She doesn't know much about herself. The denied property, that means she's also going to the hospital when she's not even ready to deliver, does not even have any requirements. So we need to have an affirmative action for Karamoja to bring them to the same level with others. Actually, when we talk about discrimination, we are saying the Karamoja having an affirmative action would bring them to, you know, they lost about so many decades while others were into development.
Yes.
We have to bring on board faith-based organization and train them first how they can be able to work with this environment, with culture, because I know in the Western region, I know in parts of the Central region, the faith-based organizations are the ones who speak against gender-based violence, and they have succeeded.
So this message should go to Karamoja, Sebei sub-region, and all these other districts.
Precisely.
Thank you very much, Honorable Peace Mutuzo. Let's also get the last parting shots from you, Honorable Kabahendo Flavia.
Yeah, I think...
the last parting shot to the cultural leaders and members of the community who are exacerbating this practice.
Yeah, for the cultural leaders, I think we need to sit down and get out the culture that really affects human rights, because gender-based violence is a human rights issue, it is a security issue, it is a cross-cutting issue. Secondly, we need resources so that we have established comprehensive gender-based violence shelters, because we found in one district where the shelter was so small and they had to put the victims in a cell in police, and so that it does not bring it well. So we need to offer rehabilitation so that we can resettle these people with either second chance education or a livelihood support, so that we address the driver.
Kabahendo Flavia MP Chegwegwa, and also the chairperson of the Gender Committee, also Honorable Peace Mutuzo, Minister of State for Gender and Cultural Affairs. This conversation has largely ended, but we shall continue with it tomorrow. We shall also keep on interacting with the two Honorable Minister and MP.